Aladdin and Abu escape and deliver the lamp to Jafar. But he tricks them and seals them into the cave. Fortunately, Abu cleverly stole the lamp from Jafar. In order to read the writing on the old lamp, Aladdin rubs it with his sleeve, and poof! A genie appears and declares that Aladdin is his new master. But first, he invites Aladdin into the lamp. Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Aladdin for the Super Nintendo. In the last part we started off the game and now we're in probably my favorite stage in the game. The genie level here, based loosely on the Friend Like Me musical number, is just such a wild trip with such an infectious version of that song playing. I love this stage. Before we get into this part proper, I should note something that I actively got wrong last time and said at least twice that I probably already called out in the postscript edits, but I might as well say it outright too. I actively got the company that made the Genesis version wrong, sort of. I said the Genesis version was by Interplay, it was by Virgin Interactive, but I see why I made that mistake. Virgin Interactive's final fate as a company, outside of being bought partially by EA, was being bought by Interplay and Titus before being shut down as the latter went out of business back in 2005. So I just kind of frequently associate one name with the other. My bad. I know that more has to do with the Genesis version than the Super Nintendo one, but I might as well have said that in the LP itself too, for when I eventually get to the Genesis version in however many years. This stage is largely pretty straightforward, but the section we saw a moment ago where the genie was making platforms appear in front of us actively changes depending on how many lives you have. Specifically, the more lives you have, the longer and harder that segment gets. If you have no extra lives, it's just the cloud platforms, but if you have one or more, there's the cards that are effectively just the springs you bounce off of, there's the rings that are the pegs you swing off of and all that, and I think it also gets longer the more lives you have too. Weird little moment to do that in, but I honestly really like that section because of it. It's one of the reasons this is one of my favorite levels. This section reminds me of a stage in Mega Man and Bass, which is appropriate given this is still Capcom. The genie balloons are actively pretty helpful in that they can actively be interacted with in one of two ways. You can either hold on to the handle at the bottom, or you can bounce off the top of them. And honestly, barring when the spikes are above you like a moment ago, I just generally find it more handy to bounce off the top of them because you get more air out of it. And in most cases, that'll get you further away, especially if you actively use the sheet to just hover down slowly. So we briefly went over the composers and planners for the game last time, but let's also talk about the programmers today. Specifically, there's 5 of them, but we only know the identities of 2 of them. Yamadachi, M30, Higashi, Ikutan, and Toshi are the 5 listed, but we only know the identities of M30 and Ikutan, Masatsugu Shinohara, and Shinya Ikuta, respectively. Shinohara often went under the pseudonym F1 Dreamer Tiger Road and worked as a programmer on other projects like Ghouls and Ghosts on the arcade, Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge on Game Boy, Super Ghouls and Ghosts, both Magical Quest and Great Circus Mystery starring Mickey Mouse, as well as Goof Troop. Their last direct programmers credits were Mega Man X5 and Extreme 2, being only in special thanks section in the rest of their career in games like Resident Evil 0, Mega Man X7, as well as the X Collection. Meanwhile, this was Shinya Ikuta's first project, and they were also programmer moving forward on Goof Troop, Mega Man 7, as well as Mega Man Battle and Chase. Into the current millennium, they were an engineer on both Onimusha's 1 and 2, a programmer for Mega Man Battleworks 4, 4.5, and 5, as well as Dead Rising 1 and Devil May Cry 4. After that, they're largely listed in project manager roles or special thanks in projects like Resident Evil 6 and several Monster Hunter projects since the mid-2010s. This last chunk of the genie stage gets a little bit crowded and a little bit weird, I won't lie, not just because of the tongues that we were using as platforms, but now we're also going to have genie springs, and with these you actively do have to hold the jump button to get the highest bounce you can. You can just idle on top of them to bounce around a little bit, waiting for an enemy to be in the right spot in some cases, but I just recommend holding down the button and jumping up as fast as you can, because frankly, most of the enemies in this game feel less like obstacles and more like part of the platforming course, if that makes any sense at all, as you can often just use them to help get to other platforms, let alone getting red gems in some cases. Just watch out for these cases though, because if you stand on them too long, they do fall, and compared to say the donut blocks in Mario, they do have a pretty short timer for that. Next up in the staff role is the object designers, so effectively the enemy designers, as well as a lot of the sprite artists. Specifically, we have Tsuyoshi Wakata as Wakata, MN Yuji Ishihara is Yuzi, Satomi Subota is Subo P, Talnob is Talnob, and Yuji Wada is Wandayu. As is common with the people we've seen in this team thus far, they actually worked pretty often with Shinji Mikami, though they were only an object designer on this and Goof Troop. After this, they were either on the design team in games like Hybrid Heaven or the main designer of ESPN International Track and Field on the PS2. Their most recent credit was in Resident Evil Director's Cut's PSP release in 2006. That's the end of the Genie stage. I love this one. The energy is just so good. It's also probably where you can hear the most just direct Capcom energy in the music in the game, because there's a lot of the same sound font there that's used in both Goof Troop as well as various Mega Man games at the time. Heck, I think the stalactites falling down in the Cave of Wonders use the same sound effect as bosses being damaged in Mega Man X1, I think. With the help of the Genie and the magic carpet, Aladdin escapes from the Cave of Wonders and flies back towards Agrabah. Unfortunately, Abu cannot sit still, and as he scampers across the carpet, is blown overboard into the desert. When Aladdin swoops down to rescue the playful monkey, he discovers that Abu has disappeared into the ruins of an ancient pyramid. Aladdin decides to enter the pyramid and find his friend. So now we're just making things up, huh, game? I don't know why. I'm used to a lot of games having a lot of creative liberties when it came to adapting movies, especially in this time period, because there was either some scenes they couldn't adapt or they needed to make original stuff just so there was more of a game there. But something about the excuse for this one just makes it feel so much lazier. It's just like, oh god, suddenly Abu fell into a pyramid. There's actively one specific scene in the movie that involves water that I'm surprised they just didn't take as an excuse to make a water level in both this and the Genesis version. But I'm assuming either they wanted to keep it more with desert theming, or they thought that scene may have been a bit too dark to make into a level for reasons, which, yeah, I guess maybe that might have been the right decision. We're actively going after probably one of the hardest red gems in this stage here. At least I'm doing it the very silly way where I'm trying to just swing off this like we did to get the first red gem in the first stage. You can do it, but as you can see, either I slip off or it's just very precise. Again, swinging with Aladdin in this game feels very satisfying, but getting a full arc going is surprisingly precise compared to the rest of the game. Overall, this is, I think, the easier game compared to the Genesis version, as I believe I've stated before, but every now and then there's just a weird moment of precision when it comes to getting a collectible. Also, hold right here to get the last red gem in this section. Getting back to the object designers, next up is Yuji Ishihara, who's worked on many games we've actively played on the channel. Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse was their first project, but they did character texture work in Resident Evil 1, texture work in Mega Man Legends, and did the Pocket Station implementation for Misadventures of Tron Bonne. But their most famous work is as a character designer for Capcom, namely being the main character designer for every Mega Man Battle Network and Star Force game. Eventually even becoming the art director for Mega Man 11 outright. Talk about a legend in absurdly good design language. I don't think they've really made a bad character design across their time there. They were also an art designer on Exo Primal, concept artist on Street Fighter 6, as well as Monster Hunter Wilds. Next up is Satomi Tsuboda. This game was actively their first project, and they had the same role in Mighty Final Fight. Eventually they became an effects and character modeler moving forward into the 3D era, especially with Resident Evil 1 being a texture artist for character models, but they effectively do a lot of work for Monster Hunter, where they were a CG artist starting in the first game, all the way to modern day being a facial modeler for Monster Hunter Wilds and an overall modeler for Monster Hunter Stories 3. We're coming up on a red gem that looks scary but is deceptively easy. There's a red gem just down that pit which looks scary and like it's death, but no, there's just a platform down there, but you need to get the gem and then jump up immediately because that platform does disappear after a moment. Also, in a couple of chests, we've actually found a red orb with a heart in it. We saw one of those, I think, as early as the first stage even. That's just a free extra heart without getting 100 gems. They're in a couple of stages. You don't need to use those to get all the hearts in the game, but they definitely help in the case you're ignoring certain green gems along the way. This part of the stage is deceptively hard if you're trying to get the gems along the way, especially the red gems, as there's times where either the hitboxes don't feel like they line up correctly, or Aladdin will just kind of try to cling off of one Cobra head rather than jump off another, and the timing just is kind of weird, especially trying to get this red gem. It just is off in a way that's hard to describe. I think it comes down to Aladdin's hitbox, especially if you're trying to glide down to grab something, is very direct, like where his spite is where his hitbox is, and that makes grabbing the gem while also surviving surprisingly tough to do. Next up, we have some chains that have some cufflinks on them. We can swing off of these, but you need to be careful because they move up and then eventually move back down in a pattern to keep the scroll going, and if you're not careful, it's easy to get sniped by the archers here. With that said, it's overall the shortest section of the stage, but we do have one of the more deviously hidden red gems in the game again coming up here. Specifically, before the transition into the boss fight, if you can even call it that for this stage, there's going to be one other guard in front of some pillars. The pillar directly behind him is hiding a red gem. You cannot see it, you can only hear yourself collect it. But the thing is, if you just see the enemy, you're probably going to try to jump off of them and ignore it. You need to make sure you land there to grab it, like so. That is the final red gem for this stage, and time for the boss fight. A pharaoh mask that clearly has a boo below it. Jump off it once and you're done. It's more of a joke than anything. Though seemingly the pharaoh's curse may have taken hold of him for a second there. Or his absurd greed. Both sound like a boo. That stage overall isn't so bad. It does have some pretty dangerous sections, but ultimately, as long as you take your time, you're not really in any big threat. With that said, we're now moving on to the final chunk of the game, and the next stage is easily the biggest nightmare if you're going for all of the red gems in the game. Thankfully, you don't need them all, but I'll talk more about why in a few moments. Using one of his 3 wishes, Aladdin has the genie turn him into a prince. Outfitted with a magnificent caravan, Aladdin, now Prince Ali Ababwa, returns to Agrabah. As a prince, he can now try and win the hand of the princess in marriage. Welcome to the A Whole New World segment. I love this scene atmospherically. It's beautiful. I love this rendition of this song. It's so calming. But if you're trying to get all 70 red gems, it's a nightmare because this is an auto-scroller that you have no way to backtrack in. And what's worse is, most of this game has pretty good maps online of the level design listing where the red gems are and all that. There's no map of this stage in those maps I can find. I actively could only find a YouTube map of them all, with only relative placements, not one-to-one, and frankly, it put me into a panic trying to get 100% of this stage, especially on my practice runs. Thankfully, you don't need all of the red gems to get the unlock that the red gems get you. There are 70 in the game, we only need 50 of them. So if you've gotten all the ones in the stages up to this point and get the ones in the remaining stages, you'll have more than enough. Just sit down and enjoy the ride. Meanwhile, let's quickly wrap up the remaining object designers for this game. Next up is Tall Knob. This was actively their last project. Before this, they worked on Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse as a character staff member, so a character designer. Super Ghouls and Ghosts, they were an actor designer, so again, sprite artist, and their first role was as a monster designer on Willow on the NES. Finally, Yuji Wada's career started with this game actively. After this, they were again on Goof Troop in the same role. Then they were a 3D designer for King of Fighters Dream Match 1999, as well as KOF Evolution. They did character modeling for Suikoden 5, background modeling for Spectros, a game near and dear to my heart. An artist on Sonic Unleashed, they were a modeling supporter on Monhun Portable 3rd, and their most recent role was as an environment artist for the Thousand Year Door remake. This makes me assume they're either a freelancer or they work at a shadow company like Tosei nowadays, just because that's a very varied amount of companies they were working with there across their career. Just when things are going great for Aladdin, Iago steals the lamp. Jafar, who is now master of the lamp, uses his new magic powers to set Aladdin off to the ends of the earth. Once more, with the help of the faithful Abu and the magic carpet, Aladdin returns to Agrabah, ready to do battle with the evil sorcerer Jafar. And save Jasmine. Come on, guys, you skipped a whole ice level you could have done there. I mean, come on. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 3, we're going to go finish off the game. See you guys then.